great. You looking. I should be wearing a morning chalk up T-shirt. I don't have one, so we need to solve this somehow.
That we'll get you one sent out right away. I feel like we're rocking like the same look right now. We got this kind of short,
Yeah,
high and tight hair, a little bit of this beard going on. Same,
yeah.
I'm like the U.S. counterpart to you right now. Like
You
we're
look
doing the
great.
same. It's in
I
the
think
glasses.
I think you're incredibly handsome. I think you look great. No, yeah, I feel lucky. No, I should,
Super
yeah,
gloss.
yeah, I should put some books on my background. As I mentioned,
Yeah.
your house look way better than mine, but I can work on that.
Sophisticated look, like the young, mid-30s bachelor trying to be, fresh mahogany, uh, you know, sort of look. Except nobody can come over right now, but whatever.
No, yeah, yeah. Listen, Justin, I mean, I have a few questions for you. I'm super interested. I'm very excited to talk to you. You're one of those interesting characters in the sport and in the world. But I've been told you're not only the guru with morning chalk up, but you're also a climber. Do you
I
climb?
am.
And
Yes,
and
I do.
I've also seen on your Instagram. I mean, you do some serious climbing, but
Yeah.
what is it that you climb, and what does climbing do for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. It's kind of like a number one, it's expression of fitness, right? So, we do CrossFit so that we can drop of a hat outside of something extreme like an ultra marathon or an Ironman, which you got to kind of train for. A drop of a hat, I can pretty much go and climb any mountain in the United States, and even a lot globally. You know, acclimatization aside, for the altitude, I'm physically prepared. I'm ready, and so that GPP that CrossFit gives you, it's a great way to express that. And I love the outdoors, and I wanted to spend more time outdoors, so I primarily do mountaineering, and mountaineering is more like mixed modal climbing, which is sometimes rock, a ton of snow, and
Hmm.
ice, and so glaciers and big snow-capped peaks and stuff like that you see in mountain ranges. That's usually where I'm heading out to, but I also do rock climbing, and I'm actually heading out in exactly a week to go climb rock up in the mountains and then up in a famous area here in Southern California called Joshua Tree. So I like doing that, and it's a great way to use my fitness, but also, um, when you're sitting up there at the top of a mountain and you slept up there in the snow, and then you look out in the morning and the sunrise is coming out, you're just like, man, dude, you can't buy this sunset. You got to earn it, or this
Yeah, yeah.
sunrise. You got to earn it, and that's really cool.
Does it have to do with the fact? Because I think of you, and I think of someone super connected. Like, I mean, you're
Yeah.
basically. I'm sure you're aware of everything that's going on in the world. Obviously, in the world of CrossFit and our sport, but pretty much. I mean, I think of you as someone very connected. Does does your love of climbing have to do with the fact that you're out there up in the altitude, you disconnect completely?
Yeah, a little bit. I come from, my background was politics and in Washington D.C. So I mean, it's message alerts all the time, constantly bombarded with information, and I took that kind of natural tendency that I have to just be in the muck and in the middle of things to CrossFit when I started Morning Chalk Up. So my love of the outdoors stems from just number one, nature is beautiful, and just enjoying, just this beautiful creation we got around us and stuff, and just loving that. But then also, I'm pretty much unreachable. And that's not the it either, because I like that solace for myself personally. Everybody needs to be able to recharge in their own way, and this for me is awesome. I get to go work out, get my butt kicked up in the mountains, but then also it's just quiet. It's just peaceful. There's nowhere to go but up,
Is
and
it
that's
something you
it.
do you do it alone? Is it something you do alone, or you bring
I
a
have a
buddy with you?
I have a climbing group, experienced climbers that we all go to. We're all mountaineers, and we met climbing other mountains and just kind of fell in, and we're all have been really willing to, for climbing, you got to travel. Very rarely are you like 90 minutes from a major climbing objective. So we all travel, and we're willing to travel. And what's great about my job is I can do a couple days of work while kind of bookending this trip, and then we can go climb. So I've met about we have a team of climbers, four of us total. They've all climbed internationally, and some in the Himalayas, South America, and the largest peaks in South America or largest peaks in Europe.
Whoa.
and some of the big peaks here in the United States. And I'm sort of slowly coming along, and I've climbed a lot in the west coast of the U.S., which houses a lot of major mountains, a lot of major objectives.
Hmm.
They've been a great experienced group to kind of show me the ropes, and that's been cool, and that's been really fun.
I find it fascinating. I feel like we all have our own formulas, right? I mean, I think once you get in touch with fitness and the joy that it brings and how how good it is for you, then you find your own little formula. Apart from climbing, do you do anything else? Of course, you do CrossFit, but
I
is
do
there
cross.
anything? Is there anything else you do like?
I mean, I read a ton. Like if it, like I am at my best when I read for a minimum of an hour a day.
Hmm.
Like I will read sometime somewhere back here, or maybe up
Yeah.
in my room or outside. If it's really nice out. I like to read classical lit, or classical lit, philosophy or history. I will read those. I think I finished 13 books between like in COVID so far, easily. Um, and just classic ones. I have a list here. I read the Lord of the Rings. I read some classic American short story literature. I read some Transylvanian literature. Um, English Patient, Peter Pan, which I'd actually never read. Great Expectations.
Cool.
That's why am I blanking? I should know this. Charles Dickens. A nice classical Italian literature book. Finzi
Yeah. Yeah.
Gardens. Charterhouse of Parma. That's a good book. That's another Italian uh, lit book. So I like to read it all. And that like helps me like drown out everything else. Like I usually
Yeah.
put my phone away and I just kind of like look, that's entertainment for me. I'd rather do that than watch TV any day. 100%.
That's it's I mean, it's really cool. I mean, I think we all have our own ways, and once you find it, you just stick to it, and you don't have to sort of agree with anybody else. And
Yeah.
okay, let's get to CrossFit. I mean, how do you've become this guru? I mean, I think of Justin Lo Franco, and I think of the voice of the sort of the media of CrossFit at this point. And but yeah, but we'll get to it later. I mean, it's fascinating what Morning Chalk Cup has become and how it started. It's incredibly fascinating, and I'm going to ask you a few questions regarding that. But I'm also interested in getting to know your CrossFit story. How did you start, and when and how and who, with who?
Totally. Yeah, that one's I think it's a little atypical. I was in college, Southern California. I was here and a guy lived right next to me, and we used to work out together all the time, go to the college gym and pump and iron, doing classical weight training type stuff, squats, bench press, and whatever. And he started doing this CrossFit thing. He started talking about all this. We had this group of folks. He played baseball, and we started talking about it, and he's like, "Oh, this CrossFit thing, I mean, you just need a couple kettlebells and some of this or that or whatever." I don't really remember what he said, but we were all kind of like, "Whatever, dude." Like that's cute. That's cute, Matt. And so I did a workout with him. I did Helen, and totally jacked me up, of course. And
Yeah.
couldn't really even. I don't even think I completed it as prescribed. I mean, the kettlebell swings were whatever. The pull-ups, though, you were just like, you get to like the second round, and you're like,
Uh,
you don't even know how to kip, but you're trying everything you can to get up there. And I'm pretty sure half of them, my chin didn't even get there. They're like, like it wasn't getting there. So I don't really remember all the details, but I just remembered that it kicked my butt. And I was kind of like, this is cool, but like I really like my lifting and my running on the track, whatever thingy I'm doing over here.
mhm.
And this was in 2006, so this was really kind of very early. The games
Oh,
hadn't
early.
started. So, yeah, so this was pretty early. I graduated in
OG
2008.
stuff.
Still wasn't doing CrossFit. He was though, and he was, loving it and kind of getting involved. And he sort of figured out that he wanted to be a coach and a trainer
Hmm.
early on and stuff. And he graduated a year after me, but I moved off to Washington D.C. All right, fast forward 2010 rolls around. I see this guy with photos competing at sectionals, and the precursor to regionals, precursor to sanctionals.
Correct.
And so he's doing sectionals, and I was like, damn, that's badass. It's like, what is that thing? And I mean, I already knew what it was. I knew it was CrossFit. I was like, I got to get into that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So it was actually the sport that drew me in because I just saw like him doing some stuff that looked super badass. I was like, I want to do that. And so I started training myself, kind of cherry picking from different sites are out there. .com obviously, but then some other famous gyms in the neighborhood. District CrossFit was an old gym. Trident, Outlaw CrossFit was in the neighborhood of Washington D.C. And I went into the gym in the House of Representatives. We have a little gym underground inside of Congress, and I started doing thrusters and burpees.
In
Looking
Congress.
like a weirdo in the congressional
Congress
gym.
Yeah.
Yeah. So doing Helen on a treadmill. Doing pull-ups on one of those, weird looking bars that they have there between the massive machines and stuff like that. And for about a year and a half, I just started doing CrossFit on my own as many days as I could. I don't think the intensity was completely there. Definitely the form wasn't completely there, but the heart was there, a lot of heart. And I started doing it on my own. And then I kind of was like, as I was looking at more of the media that was coming out and things that were shared, I was like, I know it doesn't look like that, and I think I need some help. And so I walked into District CrossFit 3 days after the 2012 presidential election because I was working in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
And I've been an affiliate ever since. And I actually now go to the same affiliate of Matt, who showed me CrossFit when I was in college.
That's a cool story.
25 miles away from my house now. I go there. I pass like 15 gyms on the way, but I'm like, I'm going to Matt's gym because he's an old friend and he has a great spot in Huntington Beach. So yeah, circuitous effect. But I got there and that was 10 years ago that I officially started doing CrossFit on a regular basis on my own. And that's been a cool journey to see.
It sounds incredible. I mean, I love hearing the stories and how it impacts and changes the lives of people. But I'm also interested in because. No, you started CrossFit, and as you mentioned, you went to work in politics, and then you came back to CrossFit. Let's stop for a second in that politics thing, because I have no idea what that is, the world, but maybe not so much on what you're doing. I mean, by all means, tell us what you were doing. But if you're bored about talking about this, then by all means, just.
Oh yeah.
But what is it that you were doing in Congress and in politics and in Washington D.C. Playing for the biggest leagues in the world?
Yeah, so basically, I was in comms. So comms, communications, press, that media environment. I was not a journalist. I wasn't working for media companies. I was working for a member of Congress. I worked for a member of Congress, congressional committee, House leadership, 2 presidential candidates, and then one of the parties. And I basically always did media. So I was sometimes handling direct questions from press and from media. I was doing a lot of writing and drafting of press releases. I was managing the social channels for elected officials, crafting messages and coming up with ways of talking about the work that we're doing in Congress and how it's serving the people back home, all those kinds of things. So I was in media. I didn't start there. I started, like everybody who comes to Congress that isn't senior, they start at the bottom and they usually take a position called staff assistant. And that's just basically like answer the phone, manage the interns, run around doing other things, write briefings for the legislative staff, do research for whoever wants it, sit in meetings that get yelled at, go get coffee, fail a lot, maybe you stick around and get your promotion eventually to either what's called a legislative correspondent. That's kind of more if you're going to go into a policy or legislative track, or something called a press assistant, which is if you're going to go in the press and communications realm, and that's the realm that I went to, and eventually made that a huge part of my career, and got to the point where I was running and executing digital strategy at a very high level. And so my area of focus was primarily digital. It was not as much traditional press like a press secretary would be. Mine was more digital comms and setting digital strategy. Signing of petitions and engaging voters online and how to build grassroots coalitions online, and then how to do email fundraising, and then how to do messaging on social media channels, and how to use visual storytelling components like video and design to help do that, all of that together. So very, very stressful. I drank a lot of coffee. My last job, I worked 7 days a week for 9 months because I was on a campaign. And I pulled more than one 24-hour session. And now I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna ask you, like, how many hours were you working? Because I think of that world and I think of crazy. I think of
Yeah,
insane.
it's mental. No, I mean, I like, but it's mental, and it's also like, remember, like the first part of this conversation, you're like, I imagine you as somebody that's like really connected, and it's like, well, imagine that person goes to this kind of playground, and they're like, oh wow, kid in a candy store, like that was
Yeah.
me, kid in a candy store, um, and so, you know, I liked it. I still like it. Like
Hmm.
I just kind of know I like some other things a little bit more. But every now and then I'm like I get into the fray, or like when we get into CrossFit Games mode, I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, yeah, let's do this. All right, I'm taking the ship over again, and this is how we're gonna do it. We're executing like this, and these are the lanes, and this is pay attention to these signals. Who's on the phone with these guys? Like I love that stuff. I like being in the war room. I've always liked it. It's always been super fun for me. And, because I'm like super type A, high intensity personality that like ADD, like loves like having like three, four televisions on at once. And I'm like, oh, turn up that one. That one's going. Like, that's me. And so, yeah, it is stressful, but for the right kind of person, they can thrive in it. It can also be pretty self-destructive too, though. So you have to kind of have a balance there, and you can run yourself into the ground pretty fast if you're not careful. So, you know, give it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a little bit of both.
I can't imagine. I mean, I think we've been super lucky to get like someone like you in the sport because definitely that's something that we needed, like that level of intensity and knowledge. But of course, then he changed that to start morning chalk up, right? I mean, why leaving all that behind and starting a morning newsletter? I mean, you're
Yeah.
gonna tell us exactly what morning chalk up is, but why leaving that world behind?
So, really kind of simple. I was on a campaign. I was working for the governor of Wisconsin. He was running for president against Donald Trump, actually, and lost. Like everybody else in the Republican side did. And so I was like, like I had offers to go to other campaigns, and I had opportunities to go back to Washington D.C. and kind of level up, which is usually what happens when you take a big job out on a campaign. You're going to get a lot more eyeballs and visibility, and people are like, oh, let's hire that guy. He's look
Yeah.
what he just did. He lost, but he was important in the campaign
Hmm.
where he lost. We call that failing up, by the way. Um,
Interesting
like
concept.
my guy lost, but I'm getting a promotion, so
Yeah.
because I did a great job that he lost.
Never heard it
Um,
before. But I'm gonna write it down.
It's called failing up. It's when your ship sinks, but you were important in the ship, so you get a promotion. But you were so important during the ship sinking that
Yeah.
you were a part of the sink, but you still
Yeah.
get a promotion. So it's called failing up. Anyways, that's just
Very
kind of like a
interesting.
colloquialism.
Yeah.
So I went and I was like, you know what? Look, I haven't had a break in 7 years. Like I've done this campaign after Congress, after campaign again, Congress, and you're just like, I need some time. So I saved up a bunch of money and I took it and I went to Italy and I worked on a farm and I traveled around. I was in Barcelona. It's the first time I went to Barcelona actually. I had a buddy that I knew from CrossFit in Washington D.C. who'd moved there, and
Cool.
John, he runs Rockstar.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool. He's
John Val,
amazing guy.
God Val. Yeah,
Oh my God, he's the sweetest guy you'll ever meet.
yeah,
John, you're the best. Yeah,
he is.
I'm gonna text him right away after this.
He's amazing. So I went and stayed with him and with Flores, him and
Yes,
Flores. That's how I
Flores.
met them. And this was in 2015. Um, and I was like, hey, I was talking to him. I'm like, hey, I'm in Italy right now. I'm working on a farm. Kind of thinking about traveling a little bit. And he's like, bro, come to Barcelona. You're gonna love it. And I was like, done. I've always wanted to go to Barcelona. It's like, I'll find a plane flight and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, whatever. So I went there. I went to England. I went to Norway. And then I came home 2 days before Christmas, and I was like, hey, cool. Let's figure out what the heck I'm gonna do now. And we have the genesis of the morning chalk up is not original. Okay, in politics in the United States, we have newsletters that start our morning. So when we wake up at 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever time we wake up in the morning, we have 2, 3, 4 newsletters that hit your inbox that are telling you everything that you need to know to start your day, to kick off your morning. Basically, the most prominent one and the most successful of them was called Playbook. And it
Hmm.
was meant for political insiders and people in and around the Washington Beltway area who were working and existed inside of politics. So it was a lot of inside baseball. It's the kind of thing that few people outside of DC would be really interested. But if you're a hardcore political junkie, and you want to know, what time a committee hearing is going to be and kind of what is being heard inside of the halls of Congress and sort of things, and like the behind the scenes elements and stuff, you'd want to see this. And so I took that concept and I applied that to CrossFit. I was like, there's so much going around globally here, not just here. I mean, not just about the games, but about the community of CrossFit, about this part of CrossFit, et cetera. I was like, we could put that all together into a place and we could start to make an impact by shaping the news media landscape into a cohesive location every single day. And we could do that. And I think that there could be a need for that. There's nothing out there that's like that. And let's take that and then let's continue to grow that and execute it. So that idea actually wasn't my own. I just applied something that I learned, and I read these for years in politics. I still read them today. And now there's a whole industry around newsletters that didn't exist prior, but it was kind of inspired and started by that very concept that started in Washington, D.C. and stuff. And so I took that and I said, hey, I love CrossFit. I love the media landscape. I'm just going to put them together, and I'm going to do something that nobody's done in CrossFit before, which is start a morning newsletter and then grow that into a multimedia company. And that's it. It was pretty basic, and I just committed to doing it. I wrote it 7 days a week by myself, and then I pared it down to 5 after a couple of months, and I was the sole exclusive writer for 2 years of that newsletter. Wow. I wrote every single edition, every single week, every single day.
Wow.
It was a lot of writing.
It's a lot of writing, a lot of commitment, and I mean, yeah. You're used to the hour. You're probably used to the hours, the working hours, but I guess it was still a challenge to be there writing all day.
It's a huge challenge. Honestly, like at the beginning, it was almost an impossible challenge because you're starving for information. But once later on, we started getting more people sharing things with us and more people sharing things with us, and our connections and our web grew, and so we were able to really actually. Find out information really well. And now our connections are all across the CrossFit industry. And so information is a little easier to come by, whereas before, nobody knew who we were, so nobody sent anything. And now we get tips all the time from all across the globe about things that are happening inside of gyms and fundraisers and competitions and community events, et cetera. So it makes the job a little bit easier. I wish I had that on day one, but it's starting from scratch, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was exactly what you still have to, you still have to do it as well as you guys do it. So you've earned every bit of success you guys are enjoying. But this was my next question. I mean, how do you get such a huge amount of information? I mean, you were just mentioning that now you get a lot of people contacting you, but you still have to have the resources to actually have 1,000 dialogues. I mean, how do you guys manage and get all that information?
Well, so we have a pretty broad staff, that we assign out. There's 2 different components to the newsletter. Number one is story writing, and one is aggregation. So we find out about something that no one's written about before, and we put it together, and that's the story creation process. And we have writers to do that. And so there are two editors. One's myself, the other one is Joe, our senior managing editor. And so we can assign those stories out to one of our writers, and they have their beats and their specialties that they work on. And then the other is kind of like aggregation. So we're taking a look at all the tips, emails that we get, all of the responses, all of the tags on social media, and being like, oh, we should amplify this. More people should know about this. Let's put this up there. Let's get this out there. And so it just requires the metaphor I use is like being a sponge. You need to soak up around you what is happening and pay really close attention to what is happening. Being super in tune to what people are talking about, and what they're saying, why they're saying it, where they're saying it, and what sort of is the pulse. That's almost a skill that develops over time. I developed that skill when I worked in politics because that's necessary to really be plugged in. And so that's a skill that I'm teaching Joe and others, is to be observant. Don't just let something pass over your head just because you heard it in one ear out the next. It's in that ear, and you're oh, and this is how we can use this for morning chalk up. This is how we can elevate the conversation, or we can share something with the community that allows them to, hey, if you want to know more about it, here you go. Like, that's part of the service that we provide, which is just giving people a place to find out more information. So we send everything to tips@morningchalkup.com. It's the email address I created 5 years ago. It's the same email address we use today, because that's one place where we know that people can always remember it, and they can always send it to us, and they'll get a response every time. So if funnels, like, you have to have like a very tight funnel if you're going to have a lot of information. Otherwise, you're like, what happened over here? What happened over here? What happened over here? What happened? You're like, and then that grows, right? Because it gets bigger as your channels get wider and you have more touch points with people. You need to say everybody. It's like a discipline. Like, nobody sends anything anywhere but tips. That's the only place, because if you're out of the office, or you're out of pocket, or Justin's climbing a mountain, people can't send it to Justin, because then no one's going to get it. You got to send it to tips. So being really disciplined and having a singular funnel to receive information was like critical.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, I can't imagine like the amount of information you guys deal with, and I'm sure we could talk for hours about how understanding how you do it, so that we can apply it to our own little lives. Maybe we're gonna have to have a second conversation, and we'll focus on that. But let me go deeper into the conversation. Of course, you guys have become perhaps the information source, and but how important, because back in the days, CrossFit did have a media department. And it doesn't exist anymore, or at least I don't even know if they exist. I don't even know what they do. I mean, it's not. I wait for the morning chalk up, and I go to your Instagram, and I really do. I mean, and I even get like partners of mine, friends of mine, sending me the news that sometimes I haven't read them yet, but I get them on a WhatsApp. Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And it's always morning chalk up. But how important is it, the fact that CrossFit is not doing the job as well as probably they should?
Well, it's in a transitionary period. So back in the day, I think that CrossFit really did need to be the preeminent news publication, because they're a beginning sport. They're at the founding stages as a sport, as an organization. CrossFit does need to be out there, though, doing the work on the behalf of the affiliates to market CrossFit's effectiveness, market CrossFit's accessibility and its acceptability for all diverse peoples, not only in cultures and colors, but also in body types, right? Adaptive or overweight populations that have been neglected. Like, that's CrossFit. If you're talking about a place where you're going to get cheered on being an overweight person working out in the gym, CrossFit is definitely the place to go. Big box gym is not a place to go. You are not going to receive that in 99.9% of gyms. So CrossFit needs to be out there telling that story 100%. And they never should have stopped. What they did is they kind of cut off their nose to spite their face, which is they lost their ability to do good, compelling storytelling, which helps each gym that is out there. Because, you might be in Spain and you see something that a buddy shared from CrossFit about somebody that looks just like them. They're not going to look for a gym in the United States. They're going to look for a gym in Barcelona.
Correct.
Right? So that helps the global community. So they stopped doing that. So that is super critical. That is 100% super critical. But that's called marketing. That's not being a news organization. And so I don't really consider CrossFit's media department to be a news organization. I consider them to be that's marketing for them. And that is critical. And they should double and triple down on doing that, because if Rosa wants to get 2x the amount of gyms globally and add 10,000 gyms that are not in the United States, he's going to need to double and triple down on that. And he's going to need to do it language specific. They need to focus on making sure that the stuff that's put out in English has subtitles loaded into their video components on their social channels. And they also need to make sure that they're hiring people overseas, not just in Western Europe, but also in other countries in Asia and South America that are going to be doing content that speaks to those audiences. You're not going to grow something in Brazil with a Chinese guy in Beijing. You're going to grow it with a Brazilian. You're going to grow it with somebody that looks like him, that works out in a place like him, and that's showing them how they can change their life. So I think that's super critical. They can't stop doing that. But when it comes to like media and stuff and like telling the story of the CrossFit Games, I think that's where CrossFit needs to be. They need to tell the story of the CrossFit Games, but I don't think that they're going to come up there and be analysts for CrossFit any longer. They're not going to be out there and being the experts in the sport that are digesting what's happening and talking about, prognosticating or talking about, the ways that like, pathway to victory and doing, line by line analysis on statistics and other components like that. That's just not CrossFit anymore. I don't really think they need to be. And I think there's other people that want to do that, not just ourselves. There's a lot of other places out there that are trying to get involved, and they should be encouraged, and they should open the doors, continue keeping the doors open for them across all languages. That's just going to be a much better strategy for CrossFit. That's, that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have started to create content in different languages, and is
Yes.
that something that you're going to continue doing, and something that it's definitely part of your vision?
Like, absolutely. So we started in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. We are probably going to do Spanish. And we started with Portuguese because we had somebody who was really interested and wanted to do it and was committed to doing it for regularly and taking a couple pieces each week. And we're trying to now refine how we do it and speed up the translation process to kind of get it closer to real time and deciding how we want to do it. And so it becomes like a little bit more of a challenge when when news is produced real time, or relatively real time. You're also kind of like dealing with the time zone. So you're like, hey, can you translate this? It's got to come out tomorrow. We kind of need this in like 90 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or max, and they're in a different time zone. So trying to figure out how to streamline that and get it all done, and also the web components to having multiple language stories and stuff. We try and figure out, my posture and mission has always been, what are other people not doing? It's not so that we do new things. It's so that we solve a problem. So if the problem is accessibility to information, CrossFit used to publish in multiple languages, and then they stopped. Now they're publishing in multiple languages again. And, we started doing this 6 months ago. And because we're like, no, we can do that, and we can put it out on social. We can share it. We can get information that's critical to the community more accessible. And that's important and stuff. And so we always look at new things in that way. We would probably pick, if we had to pick languages, it would be Spanish. It would be, we're already doing Portuguese, cool. And it'd probably be Chinese. But we don't know how we're going to display all that on the site yet. So we don't want to necessarily create Spanish versions and Portuguese versions on our site. So we've been balancing it out and sort of experimenting.
Exciting. Looking forward to hear more, and and definitely the work you're doing in English. I'm sure there's a ton of people in China and in Spain and every Spanish-speaking country that would greatly enjoy your content, basically. And going back to CrossFit, I mean, you've tackled a bit on Eric Roses, the new guy. I mean, we don't know much about him. Do you know more, and do you think he's the man to lead CrossFit into the future?
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's got a much more clear vision for growth. Greg wasn't a guy that grew by accident, but he didn't exactly have a growth mindset numerically where he was looking at these numbers specifically. It had its trends and its high growth periods. It wasn't by accident. There was concerted effort there, but it wasn't like setting a specific benchmark and meeting that benchmark and exceeding it and then resetting a new benchmark year over year. He wasn't a guy that was motivated that way. He wanted to build this great global community of friends around fitness, more than a fitness empire. And Greg always the wealth of the company, he always loved the fact that it was there, but that wasn't the driving force for him. He wasn't motivated by money in that kind of way. Not because Eric Rose is motivated by money, but he's looking at the bottom line in a much different way. So he has a lot more business-oriented approach to how CrossFit as an organization is going to succeed in the future. That's been very clear from the decisions that he's made so far. The individuals that he's hired around him, he has a core group of I call them executive leadership team that's surrounding Rosa, that's giving him advice across all sorts of different components, not just, here's game staff over here, here's affiliate staff over here. It's like, no. There's a whole different playing field above here that's talking about revenue streams, opportunities, app development, direct-to-consumer technology. How do we develop that and incorporate that into what we're doing in our core messaging stream? What is our core message? He has a comms director now. And, and so I think that the moves that he's made early on so far are very positive. And I think that there's a lot of faith in the community for Rosa and what he can do on a business side. And so I think what he said, what he's done so far, those are very, very good things. Now, you got to stop the bleeding a little bit still, from the affiliation side. We're about to go into, another COVID winter, which is colder temperatures across Europe and North America. We're seeing a lot of rises in more cases. We're seeing some gyms that close down. I mean, San Francisco CrossFit's first CrossFit gym in San Francisco closed down.
Wow.
After 15 years.
I mean, it's
that's going to happen.
Yeah. And you know more. You probably know a lot, and you hear a lot from owners and affiliates. What is the real situation? I mean, is San Francisco CrossFit just something that just happened, and it's not going to happen anywhere else, or is it going to be something that we're going to see again?
I think it's slightly a harbinger of things to come. A lot of gyms have been holding on for a long time. They figured out a way to make it work for a while. There was total closures for like 3 months plus. Then things opened up and they could work out outside, or they could work out with limitations, either number limitations, or they had cleaning requirements, etc. Now nobody can work out outside in a lot of parts of the United States and Canada. You can't do that anymore. It's just getting too cold. We're in the middle. We're the 5th of November right now. Maybe one day it's okay, maybe in the afternoon class, but not at the 5 a.m. class. No way. It's going to be way too cold. You're talking like, low 40s, upper 30s, 5-6 degrees centigrade max. And you're just not going to get people working out there. So and you've been cutting costs and maybe deferring some payments, and that adds up. That pressure builds and mounts and builds and continues to get higher and higher. And so eventually you have an owner that just says, look, we hung on as long as we can, but we're about to go back dark again. And we're going to try maybe to do Zoom classes, but, people aren't excited about working out in their own garages now where it's really cold in the wintertime too, and they can't really use weights indoors because for obvious reasons, So now I think we're going to have a lot of complications. So when I say Rosa still has to stop the bleeding, we're not out of this yet. I'm not preaching doom and gloom, but there are complications, and gym owners are going to find solutions to these complications. They are, but not every single one of them is. And so, if we're looking to the bright side of Rosa's leadership, how do we go from where we're at right now, which is low 14,000s? Mm-hmm. At the height of CrossFit's affiliation was 15.5. So we're still 1,400 down from where the height of the affiliation was. If we're going to go net 5 to 19 or 20,000 locations, man, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not saying it can't be done, but there's going to be a lot of hard work that's going to have to happen in order to grow and get people to invest financially and get excited about opening a new affiliate. And primarily that's going to happen overseas. I don't think the United States is really, I think it's kind of tapped in the marketplace. Doesn't mean you can't add another 2, 3, 4, 500, but there are 6,700, 800 gyms here in the United States. It's pretty well saturated marketplace.
A ton. Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you seen any just to try and find some positive landscape? Have you seen anybody doing something well during the COVID period that we could tell our friends to see?
Well, we've seen a lot of different trends emerge. We've written about a lot of these different trends. Emily Beers, one of our writers, if you go to our site and look for Emily Beers and look back at some of the stories that she's written, a lot of great pieces about some of the trends that have been getting set there. There were a lot of things that people preached pre-COVID, which is like, why do you have dead time? Why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And we're seeing a whole explosion of new ideas and different changes in the affiliate community. There are people using these 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. time zones to do new things. Because guess what? People aren't commuting to work as much anymore. So their behaviors and their habits have changed. And we're seeing more people incorporate different class times. People are still continuing to do Zoom courses. And they're looking at that and saying, wow, there's a whole cohort of people and individuals that's willing to work out this way. And there's also a cohort of individuals that really likes working out outside. I think that it's forcing box owners to think outside of the box, not literally, well, sometimes literally, but also figuratively, and seeing and recognizing the potential to utilize and maximize their square footage, everything that they have in their gym. How do you put that to work for yourself? And what services do you use? And so we're seeing different times being utilized. We're seeing Zoom courses still resuming. We're seeing different kinds of workout meetups. So people going into the park specifically for a park-based workout, even though they also have other workouts going on inside of the gym. It's saying, look, there's pockets of individuals that feel more comfortable doing that. I think the ones that continue to be innovative with that and pivot quickly and communicate that with their gyms are going to gym members and listen to their gym members and get feedback from them are going to be the ones that move forward much stronger when we move out of this, because they're not going to be financially, they're going to keep churning. They're going to be able to keep making rent and payments, and some of them even are able to grow, that they're finding that this is actually turning into growth. Some of the California based gyms, because we don't have the weather restrictions everybody else does, kind of in a really lucky spot since we can work out outside all the time. And gyms aren't even closed everywhere in California because it's county by county. So
super interesting. We're definitely gonna check Emily Beers on the morning chalk up and the rest of the content you guys put up. But Emily, as you mentioned, definitely worth a look.
CrossFit Journal, by the way, she worked for CrossFit for 7 years.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I did, we all started at the CrossFit Journal, and, we did quite a few things from I still remember when the guys, I used to work out, to show up at the box, and they say, no, we're doing .com today. I didn't have a clue what that was. I just thought it was some sort of programming. But just a couple last questions about the CrossFit Games, because, of course, it's been a crazy year, and we've seen a very different format. How do you think everything turned up in the end? I mean, what,
yeah.
The new format, what did you think?
I think it turned out really well. I mean, look, I think the programming was really dynamic and exciting. It was interesting. I mean, the top two obviously ran away with against the competition, and there was just brief bright spots where you thought somebody might win an event, and that's as a spectator of the sport for a long time, you obviously want to see a good competition, but all that aside, because it has nothing to do with what the games put on and executed. I think they did a good job executing. The live stream was good. The commentators were good. They brought back the old team, to execute on commentary, et cetera. We got it back on television, which is a good step forward, and that's positive. There were almost 400,000 people viewing it on the TV station alone, which is a different audience. That's trying to get it more towards the general population and non-crossfitting population. So that was great. It's a great, really good benefit. I thought the games was good. I was entertained by it. I selfishly hope that the games rethinks its format.
Yep.
I know some stuff about next season, and we'll see if it
Tell
plays
us.
out. Oh, okay. We'll do that last question. And so I don't know if it'll be conducive to paring it down, but I like the shorter. I don't like 40 athletes. I think 40 is too many. The bottom 20 are there. What is the bottom 20? Yeah, the bottom 20 don't even get paid.
Yeah.
They're just there for they're not there for the experience in the sense that that's just why they showed up. They showed up to compete and to win and to do better than they did, but they ended up in 40th or 35th or 30th or whatever. It's like, that's cool, and it's great that they got that experience, totally fine, but they don't even get paid out. So you're almost like, they're there just losing money. And I'm like, look, 20 makes a lot of sense to me. 20 is an easier field to manage. It's more cost effective to manage. When you're talking about the expense of putting on the games and the millions and millions of dollars that they spend executing on it, it's like you don't really need to run something from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, 12 hours corralling and going in and out. Honestly, I saw the 5 and I was like, 5's I saw 10 last year and I was like, okay, that was like 10. And it feels a little naked because some of the people we thought that should have been there weren't there. I think if you're at 20, you're like right on the mark. I think you've got some people that are like 15, 16, 17 that are going to come up and they're going to steal a show or a couple workouts, and they got a chance to maybe hit 11th or 10th, over the course of the weekend because, they were able to pick up and shore up some performances there. I think from a fan spectatorship, we should treat this a little bit more like the Olympics and cut the field down a little bit steeper. I hadn't really considered it, but after seeing 10 and then seeing 5, and I was like, 5's too short, but 10 wasn't too bad. What about 15? I was like, 15 doesn't quite work. It's like 20. All right, 20 might not be too bad. I could see 20 working pretty good. So I don't think they will, but I think it would be cool to do that. I think it might actually help relieve the costs of the event overall, and I think it might help elevate some of the other divisions if they're going to keep doing the divisions at the games. And you can, when there's like 12 hours of CrossFit, you can only pay attention to so much. So like us as an organization, like we can't even cover age groups during the games because like we're completely tapped. We're working 18-hour days and we can't even keep up with individuals. So like, I'm also like, hey, it would help us cover some of the other divisions too if we pared it down a little bit. So
I loved it. I mean, I love everything about the sport and everything's I find everything exciting. But the fact that this year every heat was the final heat, it was just very rewarding as a fan. He's like, fuck, it's exciting. Every bit of it is exciting. So
imagine, you don't have to do 5-person heats, but you could do 2 10-person heats. And so what we talked about was what you can do when you take less people. The options open up significantly. Like you can't do the swim event with the intervals, or this would be not impossible, but now you're going to have 10 lanes. I'm sure there's a pool with 10 lanes in it. I don't know. I'm not a swimmer. I don't go to a pool very often. Not a professional grade pool, not an Olympic swimming pool. Maybe there are 10 lanes. Maybe there's only 8 lanes in the pool. So now you're 8, 16, 24, and then the last one is 6. So, okay, so now you have 5 heats. You're like, 8, 6, no. So you have 4 heats. So, just like, okay, it's a little bit odd. And you're like, okay, that's a limitation because 4 heats, that means it's 8 heats for men and women. And then teams, if we're going to do that, how many heats is that? I don't even know. So it becomes really complicated. Imagine if you only had 10 people, 10 men, 10 women. Now all of a sudden you're like, we're not worried about that. That's not a big deal. Or the sandbag sprint. You couldn't do the sandbag sprint. You'd have 5 heats of 5 every single. You'd be doing this for 2 hours. You'd just be doing sandbag sprints the whole time. And you're like, nobody wants to watch 2 hours of sandbag sprints. Nobody does. If you pare it down, it makes it more entertaining for the end consumer, right? I think you just make it better.
I agree. Last 2 questions. One is the obvious one. What do you know about the next season and the next edition of the games?
Yeah, I think right now what we're hearing is number one. I mean, they've been having conversations with sanctionals organizers and the game staff for the last several months. Like this isn't something that they started this process way back when Rosa came on board and started thinking about next season. They've obviously moved the Open, which by the implications of that means you're going to have this shorter official games time period where you can have a second step. It's not going to be regionals. Sanctionals are here to stay. So there's still going to be sanctionals that are going to be in this intermediary step. We don't know the dates yet, and sanctionals don't know the dates yet either, to be honest. It looks like no longer direct qualifications from the Open. That's what we've heard from multiple people that's going to be the case. Whoa. Is not qualifying direct from the Open. We're going to go back to a step-by-step process. And that's good for them because the story of the season was extremely complicated. I consider myself to be pretty knowledgeable on how people qualify. And even we got it wrong because we're like, no, there's this caveat over here. And that, changes this 6 competitions ago. And you're like, oh, I guess you're right, so I'm glad if that's how it ends up playing out. Nothing's finalized yet, but if that's how it plays out, I think that's going to be very good because it now tells a cohesive story. But what we are hearing is that they'll be qualifying directly and specifically to sanctionals as the intermediary step and taking that and qualifying to the games. So we don't know how many sanctionals there's going to be next season. And we don't know what the qualification requirements or the details around that are, but it looks like a 3-step process: Open, sanctionals, and then the games. And we don't know the numbers on any of it.
Exciting, very exciting. I love the sound of that. Last question. I mean, we're very close to. We know the dates of the Open, and we're very close to unveiling where. But we do know the dates of the final of this year's Freakish Challenge, and it's going to be the beginning of February. You were here for last year's final. Actually, it feels like last century's final because it was pre-COVID. Yeah, but it was this February. What did you think about the competition, the format, and how maybe is there a different way of experiencing and living the sport here in Southern Europe?
Well, first of all, we wrote this. So the 2 years ago when I went by myself, I wrote this. It was just like this. What you have to take a look at here is there's a couple things. This is where the CrossFit Games needs to learn something, or maybe other competitions needs to learn something. This event was built to serve two things simultaneously and does it very well. Number one, to get fans involved. That is number one. It serves that purpose immediately. And the second thing is built for entertainment. Not every competition, most every competition that's out there is built to service the athletes and the competitors competing on the floor, not the fans in the stands, not the people watching on live stream. And you have an 8-hour long competition, some throwdown here with a $2,000 prize purse. People aren't really tuning into the live stream unless they know somebody who's competing there. They probably know them personally. And so that's why they only have 2,000 people watching the live stream. Now, why do you guys have a couple 100,000 people watching the live stream? Because you built an event that's meant to entertain people. It's not neglecting what's going on the competition floor, but it's involving the crowd and exciting them in a way that allows them to be entertained. You look at a UFC fight and you're like, you don't watch UFC for 8 hours of people you've never heard of before, like of competitors. You might watch 8 hours of title fights over the course of the day. You wouldn't do that regularly. So when I look at your guys' event, I'm like, guys, like this is entertaining. It's short enough to be consumed. The method for completion is understood ahead of time, and the user can follow that. The consumer can follow it. So I love what you guys are doing for that very reason, because you are fundamentally building something that can move beyond the competition floor. If a competition event is built just for the competitors, it can only grow as many competitors as you can accommodate on the floor. It doesn't put people in the stands, and you involve the biggest names in the sport, and that's really the kicker, is doing that. Now, I can tell you the one thing I would love to see more of, and I know the fans would love to see more of, is those pros actually doing real throwdowns, like doing some stuff that get people excited. 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2, even a 2 versus 2 or a men versus women in a team competition, or even mixing it up and doing some pairs. I think that would be super exciting and fun, because they're never going to get a chance to be that close to the action. They're so close. I mean, you're literally like 35 feet away from Mat Fraser or Sarah Sigmundsdottir, at your worst seat, 50 feet away. And you're right there and you get to see it. It's just live, exciting environment. And man, but that's the one thing I would do. I'd be like, hey guys, you're going to have to sweat this year.
Yeah.
It's not going to be in the CrossFit Games, but you're going to have to sweat this year. And sorry, but the fans are going to love it. And you're going to love it too. And they would go wild. So the last 2 years, the first year they worked out a little bit more that I was there. Last year they worked out a little bit less. And I was like, let's make them sweat. They're not doing anything this week. Come on,
Yeah, and I'm telling you, every year they come and they want to do it. They're really excited, and they're always willing to have a good time. Yeah. Let's
they're all heavier right now. They're in the off season.
I'm sure we'll get them to do it at some point. But thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you so much for the enthusiasm for what you guys do at the morning chalk up, and it's something that it's great for the sport. And I know you'll be doing much better stuff in the future. So we're sending you tons of energy from Barcelona. I'll talk to John and Flores right away. And thank you so much as well for the conversation. It's been a pleasure. Amazing.
It's been awesome spending time with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Justin. Take care.